it's Slippery Jack, and welcome back to another album review. Today I'm reviewing the 5th album by Aphex Twin, DrukQs. Okay, I'm not sure how long it's gonna take me to do this, but this album is 100 minutes long, and it's got so many tracks of different varieties spanned onto 2 discs. And, like, oh my goodness, there's just so much to say about this, and I'm probably going to leave out a lot that you may want to... That would be another reason for definitely checking this album out, so you'll have a better idea of what I mean by some of this. But anyway, so yes, a lot of people kind of had some mixed opinions upon DrukQs, because it feels like all these tracks were just kind of thrown together with no rhyme or reason. And in fact, a lot of music critics said that it's just like there's too much variety, too many tracks, and not all of them are good. But I would have to disagree with that. And also, these are some of the same critics that kind of slammed albums because they didn't have enough variety. I don't understand it. Just like, I think that critics need to stop being so ultra sensitive about like how much variety an album has. But DrukQs on the does not really have a particular focus. Instead, it's just kind of all over the place, and it's very bipolar. Oh, hello, Moby. So it looks like my cat is going to be joining me for the majority of my video. So there are 2 types of tracks on this album, or 2 main types, and those are the beautiful piano harpsichord tracks and crazy manic drum and bass and drill and bass tracks. I don't really know which ones I like better, but I really like it when Aphex Twin can makes really soft, relaxing stuff rather than his crazy stuff. So maybe I'll have to go with the piano tracks. But it's the only thing about that is that a lot of the piano harpsichord tracks only go on for about 1 to 2 minutes. Wish they lasted longer because some of them are very beautiful, and a lot of the drill and bass tracks go for about like 4 to 6 minutes on average. A few of them actually go up to 8 minutes. So there's I'll discuss some of these tracks. I'm probably not going to go in order, and there's a few tracks here that are just like a few seconds long that I won't really talk about. But let's start with the piano tracks. So Jin Wei Thek. There are a lot of tracks on this album that are really hard to pronounce, but I'll just try and pronounce them. But anyway, the intro, Jin Wei Thek, kind of lets you know what you're getting into with the piano harpsichord tracks. It's feels very warm, and yeah, it's a really nice track. Definitely a classic, and one of the better ones here. There's also Klad Figebung Mishk, which is it's instead of concentrating on like the warm, fuzzy feelings that Jin Wei Thek kind of was going for, this one is trying to build up like this real creepy, foreboding atmosphere, and it sounds a lot more mechanical. Strotha Tiny is this very unsettling yet comforting piano piece. There's not really any harpsichord here, just a piano, and it's really cool seeing Aphex actually use piano in his music. It's kind of a new thing. It definitely is kind of what makes this album stand out, is mainly the piano tracks here. Then there's the big one, which is Avril 14th, and which translates which I believe is April 14th in Cornish. And this is probably the most nostalgic track on the album. I'm sure that a lot of you have heard it because it's been in many movies, and yeah, it's probably even the most famous Aphex Twin track, and for a good reason. It's a very beautiful track, and you know, I can almost guarantee you that if I made like a top 10 list for Aphex Twin, this would be on it. But yeah, just love this thing so much. Then there's also the outro of the first disc, which is Hyascolia's Lithadagro and Kessin Dalek. Hyascolia's Lithadagro, or Lithadagro, I don't know, is Cornish for she spilled a flood of tears, or she spilled everything, something like that. It's highly melancholic, and I have some very devastating memories attached to this album, and this used to be a very hard track for me to listen to, as well as Kessin Dalek, which is also very melancholic. Like, when I first heard this, I just like wanted to curl up into a ball and not have anything to do with life anymore. Not saying I'm suicidal or anything, but yeah, very sad stuff, but both are very beautiful. Btoum-Roumada, I can't tell if this is, it kind of sounds like this is a piano harpsichord track, but the effects on it are just so, there's just so many effects, and they're so heavy on it that there's not really, you can't really tell, but it's a very beautiful track. Let's see, what else is there? There's Prep Guaric 3B. It's another kind of, not very, comforting or welcome track, but still pretty good. Petiatil 6 Htdui, or Petiatil CX Htdui, is a, this one is actually probably my favorite piano track, and one of my favorites from the album. It's just so beautiful, so comforting, and very dreamy, and this one used to really would hit me hard, like, whenever I heard it back in the day, and I just love it so much. Ruglin Holland is a bit like Hyascolia's Lithadagro, but not really as melancholic. Then there's the final two tracks, Beshkathriapanem, which is kind of melancholic at the beginning, but then it kind of goes into like this creepy kind of foreboding section, a bit like what was the other one called, Kladfagabung Mishk, and it goes back into being more pretty and melancholic. Then there's the outro, which is Nanu 2. This doesn't sound like the Nanu on his Window Licker EP, but it's very warm, comforting, beautiful, and also it's still got that melancholy that was demonstrated in the past few tracks. Now, let's talk about the crazy drill and bass tracks. So Bored Husband is the second track on the album, and it lets you know definitely what you're getting into this. And unlike the tracks on the Richard D. James album, these tracks are a lot more fleshed out. They go on a lot longer, and they're a lot more negative sounding. And Bored Husband starts out with the glitchy drums, and it's got this melody kind of going under it, but then the melody just like comes up and it's really big, creating this very foreboding, creepy, and slightly melancholic atmosphere. This is some pretty cool stuff here. Omgi Jaya Switch 7, which is, Omgi Jaya is a Cornish swear word, which means pleasuring oneself. And this one is a lot more, it's not as melodic as Lord Husband, and it's very industrial sounding and intense. And it's got like these whip noises, and then every now and then, like, it sounds like the sample of a person being whipped or choking. Whoa! It's pretty weird, and then the melody comes in, and then the track gets all so much better. Cockver 10 is not as intense as Omgijaya Switch 7, but a little more intense than Lord Husband, and it just kind of goes all over the place. One of the more atonal tracks on the album, and it also has samples of like this guy yelling, and I'm not even gonna say that. I'll say what you said on camera because, well, I've got younger viewers here. Let's see what else. There's Mount St. Michael's Mount, which is this one, and also Ziggomatic 17 are both incredible tracks. Probably my favorites of the drill and bass tracks. They're kind of like, if Druk's was a movie, these would probably be like the most epic parts. Like Mount St. Michael plus St. Michael's Mount starts out like all dark and glitchy, but then like this, eventually this melody comes in, and it's one of the greatest melodies Aphex has ever done. And it just sounds so uncertain, but also a lot more comforting than how it originally sounded. It's almost like a progressive rock track. And then at the end of it, the sounds are just like switching speakers so much. And if you're wearing headphones, it's like you're being shaken alive. You're like, Ziggomatic 17 is a bit different. It seems to take a little longer for its melody to actually come in. But after a few listens, I've come to love this track a lot. I imagine Mount St. Michael and St. Michael's Mount to be almost like a trip around the world, but Ziggomatic 17 kind of makes me feel like this epic factory part of a movie or something. You know what I mean? Of course you don't. But yeah, that's just kind of what it reminds me of. It's like the final, or like a final battle in a movie. And I feel like Ziggomatic 17 and Best Htdui Eponym could have switched places. But, oh well. It's kind of part of the disjointed nature of Druk's. There's also 54 Saimru beats, or translates to 54 whales beats. Saimru translates to whales. And this is probably the most intense track on the whole album. Eventually, it just is like so intense and noisy that it's hard on my ears. It's almost like the Ventolin or the Stars You Mean to Go On of the album. And there's like almost no melody at all. It's got like the sample of someone that sounds like he's saying, "Gummy bear, gummy bear." There has to be something on this album that will slightly lighten up the mood, because, like, well, at this point anything would. Then there's Melt Phase 6, which is a lot more which is probably the most pleasant and uplifting drum and bass track, and it moves a lot slower. I love the melody here, and yeah, just an overall awesome track. And taking control, a bit like 54 Saimru beats, but it's got like this creepy voice saying, "I'm taking control of the drum machine." And then there's Aphex 237V7, which is not really a very memorable track. I guess it's alright. And then there's tracks that don't really fall into either of the categories, which is, so let's see here, I'm looking at, like, my list of tracks. So there's, first of all, there's Btoum-Roumada, which translates to deathbed, or bed of death, and it's definitely a very fitting title. It's got, like, this drum beat going boom, 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 with all these atonal, dreamy piano, kind of going everywhere, and it's just really, it's a really unsettling track, and this used to be a really hard track for me to listen to at the time. Then after, Btoum-Roumada, there's Bidhayan chord, or Bidhayan chord, I don't know. And it's mainly a beat-driven track, but, like, not really, it's much more slow, and it's a lot more, yeah, very nice to hear it after the dark and creepy Btoum-Roumada. But it's also got that melancholy to it as well. And then there's Warwick 2, which I believe means art, or art, I don't know. And it's all about, it's basically a track of straight noise, like almost like you're in a haunted house, and it's just like got all these atonal noises going everywhere, and even at this one part sounds like children screaming, like something just like, you're flying around and then you go in their face, you're like, ah! 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 And there isn't any melody or beats. It's just, yeah, like I said, it's just straight noise. Definitely worth checking out. It's pretty cool. Orban X 4 is, kinda, doesn't really do much, just kind of carries on the atmosphere, and it just feels very, it still feels dark, more kind of slightly uplifting, but still has that underlying sadness to it. And yeah, that's, then there's some tracks on here that are just kind of, interludes. I'm not gonna talk about all of them, but there's, Lorna Derrick, which is basically just, a bad audio recording of Richard D. James' parents, wishing him a happy birthday. Just singing him happy birthday and saying, "It's my little boy. It's amazing. You're 26 years old." Somehow it just really helps carry on that atmosphere. Then it fades into QK Third, also known as Penti-Harmonium, and it's this is probably the happiest track on the album. A lot more comforting, and at first I didn't notice this one, and then there's yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's also Ossoids, which is just like the 7-second voice sample that I can't even tell what they're saying. Sounds like it was in a subway or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's pretty much all of Druk's. It's definitely a very disjointed album, and I can see why a lot of critics and some fans may have had a hard time with this, but there's gotta be like at least one track from this album that every Aphex Twin fan would love. And overall, this is arguably, after listening to it enough, this is arguably Aphex Twin's best album to date. I still prefer, like, his first three, I think his first three albums are still the ones that I will return to the most, as they have the most nostalgia. But this is one masterpiece of an album. And yeah, I can end the video here, but there's something one last thing I was wanting to share. So the reason why this album isn't really as nostalgic for me is because for a while I tried to avoid it. When back in the day when I was really into Aphex Twin, my grandma passed away, and while Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92 brought me comfort, this album didn't really do much, and it just kind of made me sadder about it. And then after she passed, or every time I played anything from this album, I just wanted to have I just couldn't do it. A few times I wanted to just go to my room and cry. And yeah, I've kind of gotten over it, but it still definitely has this melancholy that goes through it. It's definitely not a happy album at all, but it's just a masterpiece of an album. It's one of the greatest IDM albums you will ever hear, and you should definitely go check it out. Overall, I'm feeling a 95 out of 100, but these are just my opinions. My favorite tracks, I would say Jinwei Thek, Ford Husband, Strotha Tynhe, Bibid Hyon Chord, Avril 14th, Mount St. Michael's Mount, Ziggomatic 17, Btoum-Roumada, and Petiatil CX Htdui. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye!